There's not much of a lunch being served. I'm still between you and lunch, so do apologize if that's being a bit short for you today. I think this afternoon we have quite an interesting session. I'm also looking forward to listening from my counterparts from Thailand as well in terms of their journey for cloud. Some of you who are here this morning probably heard from my colleague King Yen. He takes care of what we call the National Cloud Computing Office that looks at how Singapore as a nation, we actually adopt cloud. I have a slightly smaller job. I actually looked after the public sector's adoption in terms of the cloud services. So basically looking at how we can help the government agencies adopt cloud services. So this is what I'm going to share with you in terms of the journey that we have come so far. Okay, let's see what it was. Okay, in May this year, we announced the initiative is actually to launch a smart nation. The objective is really to empower the citizens to be able to co-create, letting citizens make informed decisions as well as to make sure that services that's rolled out by the public services are easy for the citizens to use. The objective really is to improve the quality of the citizen's life. We feel that in order to do that, cloud computing and all its associated technologies are a very good enabler for such. In fact, for Singapore government itself, our journey started a long time ago. Way in the days where we have actually the National Grid Office. In the early 2000s, in 2007, in order to create an atmosphere as well as an ecosystem within the industry to basically promote cloud services as well as build out service providers itself. There were call for collaborations that was launched by IDA in order to build that up. And essentially many of the local providers actually started from there. In the early 2007, there were also pilot implementations as well as adoption of cloud services more from a messaging angle. For example, some of our educational tertiary educations as well as education sectors actually use Google Mails for a start. That served their purpose because it was fast, it was quick, it was also very cost effective. As the journey continues, we find that with more and more public clouds being available, we feel that from a public sector angle from the government, different clouds provide different advantages. Public cloud being the fact that they are, in terms of economies of scale, they provide good and effective, cost-effective computing resources to allow agencies to kind of experiment with projects which they feel that could be put up there. We have multiple bulk tenders for what we call public cloud services provider. I think in the opening address this morning, you have also heard that there will also be a new tender that's going to be awarded itself. So these essentially allows our agencies to choose from a panel of public cloud services provider to host systems which they feel are suitable in the public cloud arena because it is more cost effective. But for the government, we have many systems in which we feel that for the public cloud, there are certain concerns that we have, especially when it comes to security. You do remember that we actually started fairly early. In 2011, there was an idea mooted primarily to build a private cloud for the purposes of use for all the government agencies in Singapore. And therefore, with the idea of a G-Cloud was mooted. In fact, we realized that actually every government in the world call their cloud G-Cloud or GOV Cloud, so it's almost synonymous to in terms of internal clouds that we have. What we built, why we decided to build a private cloud is essentially, we feel that at that point in time, some of the security as well as the governance requirements that we needed in order to ensure that our agencies, applications, business logics and data are secured enough was not being met at that point in time by what we see out there as public cloud service provider. So that's why the decision was taken to build one, and it will serve the whole of government. All the agencies will then be able to host their applications on it, especially when it is serving the public. If you look at it, in 2011, we called a tender. Probably you might have seen some publicities or read some of the information and some of the research. It was awarded to a service provider, only one, because we felt that since it's a private cloud, in order for us to still be able to leverage on some of the economies of scale by having all our agencies coming on board, one provider was a good start for us. In the G-Cloud that was awarded, we basically focused mainly on infrastructure as a service, primarily looking at computing, bandwidth, network, as well as some flavors of different versions, different flavors of operating systems, softwares, to allow our agencies to build their e-services to serve the citizens. I think in the morning session, you've heard that they are in the Korean government, they implemented it differently. We basically tried to have a standardized environment to ensure that the processes that agencies are using can be similar across the board. We also focus a lot on to ensure that there is actually good availability, because these are really still going to be serving the public. And of course, security is very high in our list of concerns. As part of the evaluation in terms of the entire process itself, technical competency solutions were actually very high on the mark of what we were looking for. Now, I'm sure all of you coming to Cloud Asia will probably be very familiar with the advantages that cloud brings to you. But for G-Cloud, I think what the agencies are enjoying is the fact that the agility allows them to be able to put up new e-services, websites, information that serves the public in all different ways, especially now that we're moving towards a Smart Nation initiative, in as quickly as possible without going through the traditional mode of data center co-location where they need to buy hardwares and etc. This agility is also very important, especially when in the government we have seasonal needs, as well as there could be new policies or new initiatives that is mooted, and we need systems to be up very quickly. So with G-Cloud itself, this is the agility that's offered to the agencies. Security. I think one of the research that was found was that everybody's very worried about what happens if I put my data on the cloud. Is it secure enough? What happens if it goes outside of the country? With this private cloud that we built for the government agencies and the whole of Singapore, they can be very assured that essentially all the policies that surrounds internally, that what they need to comply with, it is actually built in within the infrastructure that we have done for G-Cloud. And of course, with the ever-growing and ever-changing and ever-evolving vulnerabilities that exist from it comes to cyber securities and etc., these are also part and parcel of what is built as part of the infrastructure that we have in G-Cloud itself. It is not so much just about technology, but also very much in terms of processes that you need to put in place that we have as part of the G-Cloud implementations for our agencies, that they know that when they put it on the cloud, there are certain things that they need to do in order to make sure that they are safe and they also don't endanger other people who are hosting with them. Resiliency is definitely something that don't need to be explained. I think all of us who have embarked on cloud or are thinking of embarking on cloud knows that with the cloud infrastructure, traditional problems of failures of hardware needing replacements, etc., are things of the past. Things can be up very quickly and almost minimal disruption in terms of services. Scalability. I think this morning my colleague King Yen talked about Singapore being in the tropics, always has rain. One of those things that I'm sure in the last couple of months you also realize that there will also be something that comes from our neighboring countries itself. Some of our agencies will have needs for resources overnight because of certain environmental situations that happen. And this actually, with the cloud itself, that offers us the ability to be able to scale quickly, as well as we have seasonal systems. I think many of you who are residents in Singapore knows that we have different systems or different things that happen at different parts of the year that will then require the agencies to have very high loads at a certain point in time and then scale down completely or to almost a non-existent space. So with the cloud itself, this offers an ideal situation, and with G-Cloud, they could buy when they need, build up the systems whenever there is increased load because people are going to the websites to check for results and etc. That could be scaled, and once that season is over, the system shuts down. So it is very ideal. Especially also, and I think when we are going to Smart Nation, looking at disruptive technologies itself, the infrastructure that we have within G-Cloud also allows agencies to leverage very quickly. in terms of computing resources without worrying about buying and how I'm going to set it up and etc. Now, what we offer to agencies, although it's a private cloud that we built, we tried to offer similar in terms of what they probably could see in the public cloud, but with certain governance that we have in place. So self-provision, it's done through the portal where basically they select what they want and then it will be provisioned in the back. Some people say miraculously, but actually there are lots of technologies in the back. Because it's a private cloud that we built and we have government requirements on security, we have solutions from close to 20 service providers that's put together and integrated to make sure that things are working. So through this self-provisioning itself, the agencies can decide, well, when they do want to have their resources, and then they can design. So with a simple interface, I think in the morning, if you were here, the South Korean showed, the experience was that they had some portals that we have. We try to go more on a graphical nature, design your system exactly how your system administrator, the architecture would look like, and then configure what you want in terms of your computing resources, in terms of your network configurations, etc., and then it gets spun off in the back. Through the automations and the provisionings that we have, it also allows us to collect data in terms of what are some of the utilizations from the agencies, so that if, well, maybe today they have over kind of provision what they have, through the data that they have, they can then decide to scale down. It allows us to have more efficient use of IT resources as well, and probably do a little in our part in terms of being green, in terms of all the data centers itself. What we achieve is essentially through all this, the ultimate for the citizens' experience is that it actually improves the entire public service delivery mechanism itself. People in Singapore probably are not unfamiliar. PDPC itself, they were one of our early pilot users itself. In fact, early adopters. They were one of the first websites to be launched when the Act was actually implemented itself. What they looked for was that they wanted something quick, it was secure, and, well, that was what it was being delivered. The second example that I'm sharing with you is something which is seasonal. Last year, basically, there was a virtual assistant that was launched, essentially, by our tax authority to basically help people who need to pay tax. How, if you have some questions, instead of trying to call a service desk, etc., through this virtual assistance. Because this was the first time that virtual assistance was actually being implemented itself. Going to G-Cloud and implementing on it, it allows the agencies to just focus on their business requirements of how this was going to be done, and then the infrastructure in the back primarily was taken care of. On top of just providing compute resources, G-Cloud service provider also provides services to help set up and manage the ongoing operations. So it is kind of like a one-stop place in which the agencies can go for all their services and resources, and then they basically maybe focus on just on the application and the business component of things. You see all the logos on the chart itself. We have close to 50 agencies to date that is actually either already in production on G-Cloud already, or already in the process of doing the setup. By the end of this year, we probably will be expecting close to 200 systems. So many of the ones that you may be using when you're interacting with the Singapore government itself, especially a lot of the e-services online, could probably be one of them. We started with a very small and maybe conservative target of having a certain number of servers that we have. Singapore being a small nation, in a very short span of the 2 years that we started this program, I think we are already close to 2,000 servers itself. We started beyond infrastructure as a service. We also tried to put our hands into software as a service. A lot of the demands came from the agencies after we have launched G-Cloud to say that, you know, I need to build certain applications, websites and softwares and etc. And it would be good if something is provided. What we did in May this year was really to award a panel, again, of service providers in this space of web content management, that they will allow them to build in a standard infrastructure, websites for the agencies or e-services that they need to make use of this solution itself. And we will continue to basically look at what are the services which is required by the agencies and then enrich the G-Cloud itself. I guess starting from 2011 when we mooted the idea through the implementation and through 2 years of adoption and growth, it is important that it is not quite a walk in the park. It is some days raining, like what Hing Yim may have said, in the sense that, well, it is flourishing, but there are also teething challenges. Cloud technology, although some of the technology pieces does have already existed previously, but to put it all together, actually, it is a totally different paradigm, especially when you are a user, you are an agency, which you may have been using traditional data center modes of it, of IT services itself. Besides, what we find is that governance is very important. Governance not just in terms of making sure that SLAs are met, that availability figures are met, etc. Governance in the sense that this is a private cloud that we built through a service provider. The service provider operates the cloud for us. When there are things that needs to be changed, when there are things that, whether in terms of the architecture, whether it's in terms of processes, etc., it is important that from our perspective, we still have some control and maintain control over that. So that's it over from the service provider's perspective. Not just on the service provider, but very much also when you are a tenant. That means agencies who are hosting their systems and applications on G-Cloud. This is like a community cloud. It is shared by every single agency in Singapore as a hosting option that they could have. So it is important that everybody has to play by the rules of the infrastructure itself. There are certain things that you should do. There are certain things that you must do when you bring systems on board. There are certain things that you need to do when you make some changes. I think in the morning there was one session, somebody shared that, they didn't know when things actually were changed. The service provider didn't know. So a lot of these governance is something that needs to be put in place, not just because from a technology basis, but very much in terms of processes, in terms of policy, to ensure that we can upkeep the entire security and governance requirement that we have built specifically for this particular purposes itself. Secondly, in terms of, second lesson that we learned was really to build a robust cloud. After the pilot users, we actually put in a few, I would call heavyweights to basically test the infrastructure. These actually include systems which run on huge volumes for a sporadic period of time, and then after that it comes down. The intention of that was really to ensure that whatever that we have put in from a design angle can really stand up to the test in terms of real-world experience and workloads, as well as to make sure that whatever they put in terms of the processes, it actually could meet the agency's requirements and not something in which we put together and then actually it hampers the agency's processes altogether. So we did that. We put it through. In that process, we do realize then that actually there were some twiggings that need to be done, and that was important because these were actually relevant and good points that we can then share with the other agencies itself. Third, it comes to that in terms of how did we accelerate adoption. We started fairly slowly, very cautious, taking very baby steps itself because the agencies were concerned. This is a total change environment. It is really a paradigm shift. So although the service provider has a team that engage the agencies when they need to do in terms of their systems and etc., it was important that from IDA's perspective, from the program's perspective, that we also have a team that would then engage the agencies when they face with challenges and issues, because we know the lingo that they're speaking, we understand the environment in which they need to be working under, and therefore when it comes to the education and support services, it really is a team that then focuses on how do we ensure agencies that your questions can be answered, how do we put in common practices that will be shared by everybody, and as well as how do we primarily ask early adopters to share their experience so that other people can, learn from this and then not make the same mistake itself. So this is actually achieved through, for example, portals that we have internally where there can be common architectural designs that is done when they deploy systems, or ways in which they should be doing their testings, how they should be doing their ongoing operations, and etc. We have what is called, I think, I see some of my customers in the audience itself. What we did was that in order to ensure that they actually are kind of handheld along the journey of the cloud itself, we run what is known as G-Cloud clinics almost every week for almost 5-6 months itself. This allows a very personalized mode of engagement so that you can bring the agencies who may be concerned about, are you sure it's safe? Are you sure I can do this? Are you sure that, this works exactly the same way as in the physical servers, etc. That these questions are answered. And actually it's only through this that the confidence grew. People started putting in small systems first, and then after the experience they've learned before, then they put on bigger systems itself. One of the other lessons that we had, and also which was maybe different from some of the other traditional contracts that the Singapore government ran, was we have, with this contract with the service provider, they were continually required to introduce new systems, introduce enhancements in order to meet the growing demands from the government itself. Although we are a private cloud, we foresee that, and we aspire, and we have been doing some of these, to primarily introduce new services every quarter, so that essentially we are not kind of lagging too far behind from what is provided outside in the public cloud, which is relevant to our nature of businesses itself. We have taken baby steps, done phase 1, completed 1 in terms of G-Cloud, have got quite good in terms of adoption rates. To date, probably about $60 million in terms of contract for that particular contract itself. We will continue to embark on this journey because of the fact that we have now been very encouraged by the agency's adoption. It is also timely that with the evolvement of many of the technologies in the cloud, that we essentially will then go on and build more clouds itself. That's what is the plan for 2015 and beyond. On top of that, the intention is also to roll out a cloud store. Some of you from the industry may have received emails of invitations for us to ask you to give us some of your feedback as to what services you think that you can introduce to us. If you have not received it from the IDA Cloud Office itself, do drop me an email. Thank you very much for your time.